Hey everyone, Dave here. Welcome to episode 60 of the Pocket Mastermind podcast. On today's episode, I am talking to former professional football coach Tony Walmsley. We'll talk about how he was thrust into the limelight at 21 years old, right through his career working with some of the biggest teams on the planet, and now how he uses the skills he developed from professional sport to help businesses develop great high-performing teams and great leadership. So really hope you enjoy this conversation. I think it's one of the best that we've had so far. If you do, please remember to write us a review, share with your friends, subscribe and like. And with that, let's get on with the show. Have you ever questioned why it is that some people seem to have everything they could ever wish for? Health, wealth, love and happiness, but others seem to lack all of these things. Why is it the small minority manage to achieve greatness, but the vast majority fail to reach even beyond mediocrity? What are this small minority doing differently to everybody else? It can't just be down to circumstance. Billionaires rise out of poverty. Those questions have been in my head my whole life, and a couple of years ago I decided to stop wondering and start searching for the answers so that I could help more people achieve greatness in their own lives. So join me and follow along as I uncover the secrets of the minority that the majority aren't taught, so that you can apply them to your own life to achieve your own greatness and live the life you want and deserve. My name is David Bell, and welcome to Pocket Mastermind. Tony, welcome to Pocket Mastermind. Thank you very much for giving up your time and come and share your story today. How are things with you?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on, David. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I think under the circumstances, things couldn't be better. I'm excited about the interview today, or the conversation, and I'm excited about how things are going in general. So it's good.
It's nice to have an optimistic outlook in all of these challenging times. It'd be easy to get sideswiped and kind of bogged down with the bad side, but there is opportunity around.
Yeah, and some of that's an innate. I've been classed as delusionally optimistic in the past, and I do live in that future state of everything's good and everything's okay, and along the journey, some people find it difficult to go with that level of enthusiasm or positivity, and that's the world I live in now. It's recognizing those differences and how we're all different, and that what's real for me is not necessarily as equally enthused by somebody else. So it's an important thing to recognize.
It is, and it is very apparent at these current times. It's interesting to see all the different takes and different perspectives of everything that's going on. It's definitely, everything's quite divisive at the moment. It seems like no matter where you are in the world, there seems to be polarity in all aspects, and it's a different time to be alive. It seems different than most of the other years I've been on this planet, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I think at an extreme end, that divisiveness is dangerous and threatening and concerning, even for optimistic people like me. But then when you wind that in a little bit, or you get closer together, it does just capture the individuality and the uniqueness of everybody. And that sometimes, in order to live or work or operate in the structure that we're given, whether it's a work structure or a team structure, or most of the time we get on with that in our own way, which is different from all the people that we're working with. It's a really complex thing to be trying to bring to the surface and get on top of, and I think that's why a lot of managers struggle to navigate that part of the job.
Yeah, definitely. We'll come a bit more onto that in a minute. Let's give everyone listening a bit of background. So I think you've got quite an interesting career path through professional sport, and it's taken you all over the world. And be interesting to understand where it all started for you, and kind of where you are now and where you're heading to.
Well, I first qualified I didn't know what I wanted to do, which is, I'm a late maturer in that regard. I'm 54 now, so only really last year did I really work out what I wanted to do.
Do you know, I can't remember. I heard from somebody who was like 94, and they said, "I still don't know what I want to do."
Yeah.
It gave me comfort with that.
I feel fortunate that I've got clarity now about what I've definitely landed on the right place in terms of meaningful existence and what's purposeful and so on. We can get into that later. But winding back, I loved sport. I thought that a PE teacher was the path I was going to take. Not really an academic, university didn't float my boat, to be honest. Even though I went to Loughborough and thought, oh, this looks cool, I could maybe do that.
It's an impressive place, though, Loughborough. I've been a couple of times, and just unbelievable, that facility.
Yeah, fantastic. And I was working in a sports store, playing sport, cricket in summer, football in the winter. Had trials in football and didn't make it, wasn't good enough, and did some coaching courses very early. I was sort of 17, 18 when I qualified through the FA initially, and it was the first time that the lights had been turned on, that actually football wasn't just about putting a team sheet on the wall an hour before kickoff and then getting yelled at for an hour and a half. There was actually some method and theory and principles behind it, which I just latched onto straight away, and it was a real light bulb moment. Wow, this is different. And I was encouraged. I was comfortable, in the face of working with all these older guys. I was just comfortable. It fit me like a glove, really. And I ended up flying out to Australia. I was 21, and I flew out to Tasmania, of all places, to take on a senior, what's now the National Premier League, so the second tier in Australian football, to take on a senior player coaching role with zero experience of note, armed with a qualification. And at 21, and I think about, was it courageous or was it naive? It was all of those things. Foreign country, and my perception of Australia back then was, I didn't know anything about Australian football, soccer, but I'd seen, obviously, Australian rules football, and I just had this picture that everybody was going to be this physical specimen, and I needed to bulk up a little bit, and so I did extra training and stuff like that, which was good, because I was really fit when I went there, which helped. So it started what became a 25 to 30 year career. When I think about where, there was a period of time in the early 2000s where I was working, Man United invested a fair bit of money into a project in Australia. They were looking for the next Harry Kewell, Mark Viduka, who were doing big things at the time. And I led that program for a while, and which was amazing for me. When I saw the advert in the paper, it just was like, this is your thing. So
the hell of an institution.
Oh, amazing, and what was interesting about that whole experience for me was flying over to Carrington and being part of the setup for, several weeks at a time, was just the way that people were treated, the level of respect that everybody was given, regardless of who you were. The humility was absolutely incredible. And at that time, I was a little bit disenfranchised with not necessarily coaching, but the politics of sport and the politics of the game. And I was re-energized by the culture that was on display there. The people that I was able to engage with were inspirational, and it sort of re-energized me, and back we went, and back on this journey.
Do you think that was Ferguson that really led that?
Oh, definitely. I think the people have asked me about that before, and I think it's dangerous to benchmark managers and leaders against such outliers as he is and he was. He was so successful for so long and did it in his unique way. I think it's a dangerous thing to try and follow that or emulate that. Take the good bits out of it, but I think be yourself is the absolute, be the
ultimately,
best version of the best
yeah,
version of yourself is it.
and that's what he was, right? We kind of slightly deviate here just to talk about him for a second, but I think when you talk about leadership, I think the important part was he was himself. He created that from himself, and I think if you try and copy leaders like him, like you were saying, you can copy the tactics, absolutely, but you won't necessarily get the same result because you're not him. You've got to take the principles, but still use your own way. Your magic source is you, right? And you just got to find what that voice is. And I think that's what we struggle with quite often.
Yeah. So that was interesting. And around that time, I started to think about, because football in Australia was a very, at the pointy end of the pyramid, very few professional clubs, so very few opportunities. And I wasn't that ambitious to be in that environment. I ended up there managing an A-League team at the back end of my coaching career. Finished in 2016, where I got fired as coaches, managers do.
That's the badge of honour. You can't be a proper coach unless you get fired. Surely.
And you have to hold your hands up, and whatever the circumstances, take responsibility. Is the pathway to really learning from the challenges that you face, and how did you manage them, what could you done better, all of that sort of stuff. And there's some fascinating, being asked on live TV by Mark Bosnich whether you should resign is a great experience when you look at it in, I lived through that, and danced on my feet in the moment. And
what was the answer?
Well, the answer was a really authentic answer, which was the process and the situation. I gave him an honest answer about where we were at and what we were doing with, and what the vision for the organization was. And it was the only answer I had. It's not about, it was a loaded question.
Yes, and it is very loaded. Yeah.
There's an agenda behind the question that, I was never given the opportunity to go on TV and ask questions back. That's Nate. If you're in the media, you've got the power. You carry the power. There's no doubt about it. So it from where I'm at now, and that was such a small part of the whole journey that I've had, but a great experience nonetheless. To go, if I'm talking to a business leader who's under scrutiny, who's under pressure, there's external demand, there's competitive environment. I know what that feels like.
Yes.
So I can have and it's not essential, but it helps when you're having those conversations, because you can tap into, you can empathize, but you can also offer perspective and the ability to help people step outside of themselves and see it for what it might really be. Just a set of demands that are external to you, plus maybe your own fears that are holding you back from going where you want to go. There's all of that stuff in play all the time, which fascinates me. So I was before then I was tapping in and out of business. I set up my own little thing. I worked with some other people, collaborated on a sports travel management company, and I started to realize the value of my network and how that could help other people grow their business. And I'm a really open person by nature, and got burned a couple of times. Again, great experiences, and you can either go two ways with that. I think you can close up and be a little bit more resistant to it, or you can just continue to be yourself and make better choices and be more careful about where you go. So that tends to be the way I went. So I had this pathway of, this 25, 30 year career in football. I've got this timeline on my website. On the right hand side of this timeline is my football career, and on the left hand side is my business career. And there's this middle section of football where I started to, you could see this entrepreneurial streak of what it is, whether it's curiosity, I'm not really sure. I started to do other things, and I was definitely interested in learning beyond what the game was teaching me, and what coach education was teaching me. Lots of travel as well in and around that. Until in 2012, I took a complete sort of right angle 90-degree shift and went from football into a really senior leadership role in a joint venture in Australia, UGL Unipark, big engineering and logistics.
Oh, that is left field.
Oh,
right?
wow! Honestly, talk about. I knew I transferred skills when I had to do what's called a standard work project, and this was all about rail maintenance. So the contract I was working in Australia in the business development department for an organisation that had a massive contract to maintain Sydney fleet of trains, about 1,000 trains knocking about that need regular maintenance. So that was the environment that I went into. It's part of my training in the UK, as well as learning about lean methodology and Six Sigma. I'm not a mathematician at all. That was so out of my league. Did negotiation training there, strategic selling, all of that kind of stuff. The hardcore learning was in and around standard work processes. So I found myself doing and I'm a Man United fan, by the way, so I found myself doing a standard work project in Liverpool for 2 weeks at Allerton Rail Depot. And I took a moment to sort of capture for myself standing under a big, dirty diesel engine with a hard hat on and a clipboard, talking to a bunch of Scousers about is this the best way to fix this train? So it's such a
it's a long way.
I can see where the crossover is. I can see where the crossover is about different teams doing the same job in different ways, and all the personalities that went into that.
But the environment must have been so alien.
Oh, it was frightening. So it's funny. I had to give a report to the Northern Rail about what I'd seen, and I'm really proud of it. I got sort of a commendation from the chief of Northern Rail. He wrote a letter to my bosses, which was fantastic. One of the things I'm most proud of. But what it said was, not sure he knows a lot about trains. However, what he did, and we'd have him back anytime, sort of thing. So it captured it in a nutshell that I was in this alien environment, but doing some interesting and relevant work, really.
What was it that made you go take that leap? Because it's a big kind of industry career change, really.
Yeah, there's two answers to that. One is financially, it was a brilliant, too good an offer to turn down.
But where did it come from in the first place? Because you don't stumble across that when you're on the football field.
Yeah, it's just, right? Oh wow, I'll take a classified ad in a newspaper. Yeah. Football coach wanted to fix trains. It was just like it was made for me.
Yeah.
The reality was I met a guy for lunch who I was working in England at the time at Sheffield United, and I met a guy for lunch who I'd met in Australia. He was the CEO of this company, and I'd met him through football, and he was over on business, and we'd agreed to go for lunch. And it was, through the conversation over lunch, I asked him, again out of interest, what would somebody like me do? I was just trying to understand his business. What as a CEO for this big thing? I didn't even know what he did, in detail. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those moments where he puts his knife and fork down, and he said something on the lines of, we can't get enough people like you in our industry. And I didn't really know what that meant, so he explained it, and it was all about the softer skills. So mm-hmm. when I went in and experienced it for myself, there was a very highly regulated, compliant environment, a massive contract. It was $1 billion contract that they were servicing, and lots of highly qualified subject matter experts getting things done and trying to get things done more efficiently, more cost effectively. And so I land at this place and I'm thinking, major imposter syndrome. What the hell am I doing here, and why are they paying me to do this? Didn't really understand it, but was excited because the conversation went from, "Oh, we can't get enough people like you," to "Let's have dinner. What does that mean?" Explained it, and within a short period of time, there was an offer. It was like, so I was on a roll, and
it's amazing where one lunch or whatever, one dinner can lead to, right?
Yeah, and the guy that took me there, he's a very he's somebody that I would call a real mentor of mine, because I was sitting in leadership team meetings and watching all these experts go about their business and how they report to the business, and how he managed all of those characters and personalities within this environment. And he's dealing with unions, and he's he's dealing with a lot of agitation, he's dealing with irate customers, and I'm sitting there going, wow, this is amazing. Look at how good these people are. What the hell am I doing here? And eventually started to find just and this is what I loved about him, and he obviously saw something that his business needed, and he saw something in me that could fill that gap. And I was like a gap filler, so I found myself in between, or in the middle of a really challenging customer and service provider dynamic, and able to just make people feel a little bit better about what was going on, and take the personality out of it, and start to bring things down to what is really going on, and let's find a way that works for everyone to get through it. And it was really in simple terms, it was about that.
Do you think that in that kind of environment they were struggling to find people with the softer skills, because it's such a technical environment, and that quite often in industries where it is very, very, where it is technical and very kind of cold, I guess, that the people tend to rise through the ranks, from a very technical background, rather than coming in at the level that you came in at, from other experiences. So I think you kind of get conditioned, right, from a young stage. You go through your engineering qualifications when you're younger, and work your way up, and everything's very, very process technical, and the human bit doesn't get taught.
It's absolutely the case, and that's one example. And I'm heavily and deeply into this sort of work at the moment around personality, and another example similar to that is like the high performing salesperson, or related to football, the top player that's coming to the end of his career that walks straight into management. It's the two completely different things, and one's far more complex than the other. One is you learn your trade and you learn how to do it really well, and the next is, well, there's a load of different people now that
a lot more plates to spin
that you're responsible for getting the best out of, and that is a really complex thing that most people don't navigate very well. And I believe most businesses of the competitive advantage is sitting in the room. They just need to find a way of bringing that to the surface, and that's the stuff I'm working on at the moment, which excites me the most. And I relate it back to football all the time. It's no different. When I've been unsuccessful, I haven't got close enough to the root of the problem for each of the individuals quickly enough to get traction and move the dial in the right way at the right time. And once you're in that cycle, in a cutthroat world, high performers leave quickly because they've got options elsewhere, and then it's just a cycle of doom.
So did you go from that role to what you're doing now?
No. So what happened? So I went from the rolling trains and I went back to football. So I was given an opportunity to manage in the A League.
Back in Australia.
Yeah, and because I was consulting back to the owner at the club while I was doing this job, just helping with some strategic recruitment. And I took on a caretaker role for the back end of the season, which another funny story, really. The business outsourced me to the football club for 7 weeks on corporate rates to go and see this thing off. It's sort of unheard of, and in some ways, hard for me to believe that happened, and certainly hard for people in the organisation that outsourced me. I can see how some of them would have been looking at that and scratching their heads as to how is that, and how it played out. I left work on Friday, so we managed to get this deal done, say on a Thursday. I had the day off scheduled anyway on the Friday. On Saturday, I was on live TV as the head coach of this team. So I left the office Thursday. Wow. Saturday, I'm on live TV, and I'm back in the office on Monday. And people have obviously got different views on what they'd seen and how that had transpired, but fascinating nonetheless. And I got offered that job on a permanent basis, which I took. It was one of those hearts over minds decision, really. Does that opportunity ever come round again? Very unlikely that it would. So I took it, and it ended the way it did. And when I lost my job there, moved back to the UK, all my family were here, and this is when I was really starting to think about what it was. A moment of, okay, stop. What are you doing? So I took a fair chunk of time out to process what I was going to do next, and along that path, and this is where. So in the space of the next 12 months, I spent time on a football project in China, and then India. So it was 2 other sort of wild, crazy adventures that I suppose capture a period of uncertainty for myself. You know, it doesn't look like there's a real clear plan going on at that point in time, and there definitely wasn't. In both cases, I saw the potential and the scale of China and the scale of India and the growth of the game there. I wanted to be a part of that, and saw that as, you know, it was fairly opportunistic. But nonetheless, it was neither project were right for different reasons, and it was at that time I thought, no, let's just stay put in the UK. Let's get some stability, grow up a little bit. And I then went back into the business world. This time again into another sector, in the technology sector, which is probably, you know, if trains were, if transport and infrastructure was one thing, tech was something completely different again. You know, in terms of fast moving, digital transformation, solution selling, high pressure sales. You know, we were similar to yourself in the organization you worked with. It was a NASDAQ listed US based organization, of which we were a very small part in the UK, but a Microsoft, you know, tier 1 partner nonetheless. So it was, you know, to go into a tech industry of that stature was pretty phenomenal. And, you know, what I learned about sales during that time, it's like a paid sabbatical. It's like you're getting paid to be trained, you know, as well as you can be in terms of sales methodology and stuff. It was quite fascinating, but I'm not technically wired, and the grind of that just wasn't for me. And I had a bit of ill health, well, a lot of ill health during that period, and those 2 things combined, I went and resigned one day, and it was at that point I thought, right, this is time to line in the sand. What are you going to do, and why? And here we are.
And what was that? What was that process then when you drew that line in the sand? Because I think, you know, you as you described, you kind of had you've had a an interesting career, and it's meandered. You've taken different paths, and I think the fortunate of being in professional sport, there's obviously so much you can then translate across into other areas, and you'll be able to transplant that into other business. But I think a lot of people, much like you, much like myself, who go through a significant portion of their career not really having a plan in place, right? You go from if you're fortunate enough, you're able to keep progressing and rising up through whichever path you're taking. But at some point, I think most of us reach a point saying, and we want more. We want something that feels like we're contributing, or something that means something. And so what was that what did you do once you kind of came to that line in the sand, as you put it, and said, right, I've got to do something else? What did you do at that point?
There's two things. One was to work out, it was never about not wanting to be employed by somebody. I was quite happy being employed. I've never been one of those people that needs to be in control of his own destiny. So it wasn't about that. But I definitely knew that I was a coach, that I was consultative by nature. And I first started I wanted to work out what was meaningful about high performance sport and my exposure to that in the context of business, and what did I learn in business that could transfer back into sport. So having had a foot in both camps at a really high level, I thought, okay, there's something in that. What is it? So I started to study around that. And when I decided that I'm a coach and a consultant, and I'm a well-trained coach, pro license in football, but I'm going into a performance coaching environment in the corporate sector, what else do I need to learn? So I started to study psychology, and I started to study it in a way that I could apply the principles to my own life. I was really fortunate. So I'm fortunate to be able to reach back into a really strong network of people. And I did a deal with a group called the Colloquium Group, who are very academic, psychologically trained. One's a PhD, there's a master's, a proper coaching company, Australian-based, who I'd met. And I offered to help to transition their business from being an organically growing, well-respected business in Australia to globalizing, use globalizing in the broad sense, have a UK base and start with that. So that was part of this journey of, being able to tap into those minds and so on, but at the same time studying cognitive behavioral therapy. I did all those modalities, and I wanted to understand what was driving and understanding my my preferences and my approach to life and so on. And I've always had an interest in that. So those two things combined brought me to this point, and part of that was to do a really deep dive that took me to really uncover what my core values were, and not in a light touch way, in a pretty stripped back way. And there's some hard truths to face in that department, so you face up to those and go, okay, what is it about those things that make it a hard truth? And that's where your values lie at the end of the day. If there's something that's really been at odds with who you are, then you know what it is. You just have to be honest about it. And so I've been through that, and then to wind that forward into the future. So I've decided this is where I'm going to be. I've looked back at all my life lessons and inspirations, and what drives me, and what fears hold me back, and all of the personality characteristics that are innate, and some of the behaviors that I've learned along the way, good experiences, bad experiences, and when I capture my life in history, I've got these chapters of my life where you've got this crazy, lots of bad stuff happening, then really good stuff, lots of bad stuff happening, then really good stuff. So when it's on a page and you can see it, and you start to put some meaning around it, you go, oh, right, okay, that makes sense. So you made sense of all that, and you go, okay, so I'm sort of, this is where I am. There's a hell of a lot I don't know, which is a great place to start. So any conversation or business that I go into now, I assume that I know very little, and it's all about that being curious about what's at play. And then
that's interesting on that, just because I think we kind of learn to be scared of taking that position. I think that we tend to go into things trying to front up like we know more than we actually do, and it prevents us from learning more than we otherwise possibly could. And I don't know whether it's part of us, it's built into us as we grow up through education or where it comes from, but there's this kind of fear of looking like you don't know what you're doing. But everyone has the same fear and the same doubt, and yet we all keep hiding it. And it's just an interesting thing for me that to go, when you're going in, particularly to consult, it's important that you go in as being the dumbest person in the room to a regard, because that's how you're going to understand how that organization or how that group of people or that individual currently works and operates now. Otherwise you can't, if you go in telling, what are you going to gain from that?
And I think a coach's role, and I am a coach, I'm not, unless I'm in a very specific, so if I was in a conversation with a young football coach, an aspirational manager, I could probably do some mentoring because I've been there, and if I was invited to mentor, I could mentor. But my natural state is to be curious and try and explore what's meaningful for the people that I'm working with. So at the moment, I'm working in the aviation sector. It's a massively challenged sector. The company itself's gone from 1,500 to virtually half the number of employees. So they're having to transform the way that they manufacture what they manufacture. And as part of their internal process, they've pushed some people into leadership roles before they're ready. They know that they're going to grow into it, but they've got all of these complex things to deal with. Most of that's external demand and out of their control. So helping to map their way through that is relatively straightforward, even though it's a complex dynamic. The real challenge is what is it that's holding. If you talk about imposter syndrome, or if they've got an innate need to be liked, or a fear of not being loved, or a fear of not being accepted, then it makes things ultra complicated for them.
I think that's what really prevents a lot of people from being authentically them. We were talking earlier about Alex Ferguson, how he was authentically himself, and I think that's that fear. And I put a post out about this actually earlier today. Is that fear is the single biggest killer of human dreams and achievement, because the only reason we don't do something generally is because we're scared that either we don't know how, or we can't, or we'll fail, we'll look silly, or something else. And that's the big, I think that's when you're coaching, I think that's probably the biggest area, is understanding what those fears are and how do people overcome them.
I agree. And I think having a purpose, defining a purpose that's got meaning, makes the steps that you might take a little bit easier. It makes saying no easier. It makes you can align your decision making to it. And helping leaders perform better is about you want to be making the right decision more of the time. So you want maturity and decisiveness. But they're all I'm working heavily in the personality realm now, and there's no one type makes a good manager. There's no one type makes a team player. You know, some people will say that he's just not a team player, which is not true.
No.
They've just got different things that they bring to the table. And the best teams have got a mix of everyone, and that's whether it's sport or in business. And the manager's job or the leader's job is to understand that and be the person that adapts first and makes the steps towards that. And I mean, that's what I do really. I bring those conversations to the surface that don't normally get had, and the turnaround as a consequence is really quick. People have suddenly they're saying things or they're being asked questions that they weren't asked before that really matter to them in the way that matters to them. So they feel valued, they feel respected, they feel empowered. You know, if a manager knows that somebody likes autonomy, then even if it's not the manager's natural style to give so much autonomy, if I've got enough self-awareness, I can go, in this situation, I can let that go.
Yeah.
And the results of that are more engaged workforce, more productivity, less mental health, less absenteeism. All of those measurable metrics are going to reflect really well on me as the manager. You know, in a sporting context, better performance, more happier fans. You know, no TV pundits asking you to resign.
Yeah.
It all goes full circle. It's the same wherever you go. And I think the big thing the biggest thing not the biggest, I think individual differences are the biggest challenge that people face. But in sport, the bit that gets really scrutinized and is under the most pressure is the performance at the end of the week. So Saturday afternoon, you have to be at your best. You have to score more than they do. And you get pilloried if it doesn't go really well. There's consequences. And consequences for the team, for the manager, and for the individual. That's when the fear really kicks in. Can't show myself up. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to make that pass just because. And subconsciously, all of that sort of stuff going on. I think about my style as a manager and think, you know, this zero fear, you know, enthusiasm, glass half full, we're going this way. Great in theory, but with a group of young people who are not yet certain about themselves, who are not going to speak up and say, boss, can we please just change the way we do that? Wow, if I'd been better at having those conversations, it would have been a little bit different. And I've got to hold my hands up and go, that was, I'm happy that most of the time I was really successful before. And you question how much of it was by design and how much of it was a bit by luck and a bit of natural ability. What I'm able to do now is I can rationalize that and I can cope with the pain of failure, because I think that they're the best bits. And now we've got a structure where I can, because I know that how complex that is, and the statistics tell me that the global workforce are passively disengaged, 65% of them just turning up at work. And you know, what does that look like when you're on the phone to a customer? It's not great.
No.
And I spoke to someone in healthcare 2 weeks ago, and they talk about incivility kills people. So if you're in a hospital environment and there's rudeness or a lack of civil behavior between people, there's a spin-off, a negative deficit cycle that comes out of that conversation that in a life and death situation can impact the way people think and how they do their job. And in sport, that means I'm not playing at my best, or I'm not playing for my teammates, or I'm not playing for the manager. You know, all of these things going on in your head. In medical situations, that's life and death. In sporting situations, it costs jobs. In business, it costs profit. and it's all the same story.
Yeah, and jobs, you know, I think we kind of get stuck in our own small worlds, and understandably so, and we quite often don't have the benefit of having that larger helicopter kind of view of the ripple effect, right? The butterfly effect, as it were, kind of that small action, you know, the simple things. And I think, you know, when I don't know, you walk into a coffee shop and you snap at the person behind the counter, or they then interact with their colleagues in a more negative way. One of their colleagues has a really bad day. They go home, they shout at the kids. Do you know what I mean? The knock-on effect is so large, and within organizations, that's so true, that if the culture isn't really fostered, and people don't feel listened and don't listen to and don't feel valued, then they don't contribute to each other in that human way. And like you say, the knock-on effect is enormous. And I don't think these are the kind of skills that aren't invested enough in, I think, in my opinion. You know, leadership, like you say, more often than not, people in leadership roles get promoted because they were good at a specific technical task, whether it be selling or something else, prior to that, rather than necessarily for the skill to understand and to lead people. And great, they might have an ability to actually, you might have been a great salesperson, and you might have the potential to be a great leader, but if no one invests in you to make that leap, it's a huge jump and a completely different skill set.
Yeah, it is an incredibly complex. You know, I know from doing a deep dive about myself how complex I am.
Yes.
I'm married. I know how complex my wife is. I know how complex, you know, opposites attract, and then you get the friction that goes with that, and then the growth that comes out of those two things together. And when you throw that into a working relationships, you know, you use the term culture, and I'm playing with this a lot at the moment around resolution. So I see the term business culture as a very low resolution proposition. Mm-hmm. So it's like a hierarchy where at the top is the business culture, and at the bottom are all the conversations, the very high resolution conversations that are going on between people every minute of every day. And a lot of them, because that's how people converse, not because they know how to have the best conversation in the right moment. So the gap between the aspirational culture and the reality is more often than not huge.
Yes.
So when businesses talk about a good culture and having and wanting a good culture, they have to be thinking about resolution and what it means for all the different people that work there. And it touches on diversity, it touches on just individuality, tolerance, loads of different things, and it's all trainable. The challenge is to make it affordable and simple and easily applied. Mm-hmm. And I think because I study personality a lot and I've developed some tools that address these team dynamics and leadership performance, what I've found is that a lot of the tools that are out there deal with things from quite a low resolution perspective. So or their behavioral perspective, behavior changes from minute to minute. What I want to do is go, right, we don't just fit into a red box or a blue box or a green box, or we're not a label, or we're a mix of all these different things, but it's a bit ambiguous, so it takes a lot of interpretation to understand or to have conversation. Too complicated, people back off and shove it in the bottom drawer and it never gets used. What I want to do is say, okay, you're individual, I'm individual, she's individual, the manager's individual. Let's understand what those differences are exactly right now. Do you agree with this? Do you agree that this is who you are? Yes, 80%, 85%, bang on. This thing I don't agree with. Okay, let's ignore that. So this is you, yeah, okay. And this is you, yeah, and this is you, okay. And the environment that you're in that's putting this external demand on you is asking you to do these things. Are you aligned to that first and foremost? yes or no. Most of the time, yeah, I'm pretty happy. Fantastic. Then you're in the right job.
Yeah.
And now the manager, how do you like to be managed? And how does the manager like to be reported to? So if you get the environment right, and you get the manager's self-awareness right, and then the manager being able to bring to the surface this individuality, I would call it, it's a theory I'm working on at the moment, like don't lose the dressing room before you even start, because otherwise most managers go through the day banging into people.
Yes.
Not intentionally.
No.
But it hurts sometimes, and that pain doesn't go away easily.
No.
The person then going, when's he going to bump into me again? So
Guarded,
I'm not going to show my hand here anymore. And that's disengagement in a nutshell. And that erosion of engagement culminates ultimately in all sorts of, there's only one end to that, and it's jobs and it's mental health and it's at a high level it's productivity, it's team performance, productivity, just not good enough.
Yeah, entirely. I think helping people to understand other people is the biggest key to fulfillment and happiness and everything else. If you can gain an appreciation and an understanding for those around you, you don't, everyone does have a slightly different take on their own filter of the world, and try not to expect everyone to have the same filter as you, and then shutting the barriers up when they do have a different filter and not knowing how to handle it. I think if you can create that level of understanding, then teams work far more effectively, and then you go home more happy and more fulfilled. Your life at home becomes more happy and more fulfilled. If you're miserable all day at work, the chances of you going home and being the best you can possibly be as a parent or a husband, wife, whatever, it's very slim, right? Because you're carrying the whole day's worth of frustration and upset and whatever it is with you. And I think organizations have a huge responsibility to help ensure that people within their organization have that level of understanding, and they do make an environment where people do feel safe and happy and fulfilled, because the knock-on effect is huge, right? We don't think about, you go home and then the kids get raised by someone who's miserable and unhappy, and the cycle just perpetuates and magnifies, and it's easy to point the finger and say, well, parents should do this or someone else should do this. But if you want to have a successful organization, that's where the responsibility lies, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I went off track before. I was talking about the performance in sport was at the end of the week with all the scrutiny on it.
Yes.
When I take that, and the rest of the week then is about recovery.
Yeah.
What do we learn? We recover. We prepare again. Prepare. Go again. Scrutiny, pressure, perform, and so on. And that's the cycle. You go into business that's under pressure. The pressure is constant, so the demand for results is daily. The demand from customers is incessant. It's constant, and the difference that I'm seeing in the businesses that I'm working in is the demand for high performance is so high consistently. It's not humanly possible to be that all of the time.
Yeah,
and there needs to be the consequence of that is burnout. People get burnt out. They take days off, or they look for another job that's got better work-life balance. All of that sort of stuff. That's what mental health. They're big issues that come at the back end of that. But in the moment when that's happening, helping businesses and leadership groups recognize what high performance, or what a better approach to high performance might look like, that's going to have these benefits, is an important thing to do. So if you marry that if you grasp that as a concept and go, okay, yes, it's ridiculous. We understand that we're asking too much of these people too often, in order for them to be at their best all the time. There's a deterioration in how they think about us, how they feel about work, how they react to their teammates, customers not having a good experience, all of that kind of stuff. Right, we can grasp that. Okay, now we've got these managers who've been put into situations without adequate training in without any applications that help them understand the complexity that they're going into. So we understand this. We understand what performance looks like for our organization. We know what the goals are. We understand what high performance looks like. Have we got the people in the right environment, the best fit? Brilliant. And now let's make sure the managers understand the complexity that's at play and how to, and it'll never be perfect, but how to really optimize that dynamic to get the most out of the team. If you get that right, you've got a high performing organization, I believe, or a high performing team, football team.
Yeah, you do. Team. And it's just getting to that point, isn't it? It's accepting that you've got to take another line in the sand, really, and say, right, we've got to take a pause, and we've got to invest, and we've got to take the time to go through that process. I think everything had this conversation previously where it seems in a lot of business now, whether it be a technical change or any other kind of change, everything's expected to be kind of a big bang moment in time rather than a continuous transition and a continuous evolution of what the business is and how it operates. I mean, we kind of, well, what do we need to do? Okay, we need to do this enormous great project that's going to take 3 years to deliver, which by the time it's delivered will be completely out of date, and we're going to be asking the same question again and wondering why we delivered something that we don't want. And I think if business could take more of a continuous improvement type approach and start addressing, what are they trying to achieve, and how, and what are our methods for achieving that? Do we have the right people in place? Do we have the people that with this? Have we given those people the skills that they need? I think you find businesses being, probably waste less money, become more efficient, and that's what they're chasing at the end of the day. And I think a lot of the big decisions are based around the competitive environment and the fear of competition and trying to stay alive. I think everyone's on ultra high alert, from the senior management teams all the way to the bottom, and it's just not sustainable. Yeah, and it's not a healthy way to be. I think in terms of, if you look at the individual, so just purely from a self-awareness point of view, it's pretty much the same process. As an individual, it's like a really low resolution thing was, he always drives me insane, he just drives me crazy. He's one of those guys that does this. Well, there's a bit more to everybody than that sweeping generalization. So at the top, there's that really low resolution. I don't like him, I don't like her, I don't like this, I don't like that. Well, let's drill down a little bit and understand, what are the good bits? What do you really like? What is it where's that friction coming from? If you can understand that, you can sort it out, because nobody wants to really live like that. There's some people wired to like to have a bit of friction. Some people get sport out of it for some reason. Yeah, exactly. It's not about disorders, is it? No. Just quickly back onto you. What's been as you've gone through all of these different, you've different in roles and all the rest of it, and now you're out on your own taking the entrepreneurial route. What's that experience been like for you so far, and what have you, I guess, been able to carry over? What's the difference been for you? The first thing is it's evolutionary and it's continuous. So it's the first part of it was to, if you think about, so the brand, my business is the Leaders Advisory, and that was a process of working out where in the landscape does it all marry up, and that's available as a domain name. But behind all that was I needed to get clarity around what it is that I do,
So my vision is stronger people. That's a really simple 2-word vision. Stronger people. And what that means to me is that whether that's my personal life, relationships, family, friends, or clients or businesses that I work for, that ultimately I add value to the people, that they're stronger for the experience. They're better for the experience. And, I work around, if you think about footballers who grow, they've been in an academy all their lives, they make it as a professional, and then they quit, and suddenly it was all they've ever done and all they've ever known, and they identify themselves as, I'm a footballer. It's the same as a CEO. I'm a CEO. I'm a train driver. They're not. It's often along those long journeys that people go through. There's a big gap in understanding of who you're being, your experience in life in your own way, and I want to help people bridge that gap between, so be better at who you are, and as a consequence of that, you'll actually be better at what you do, and you can refine what you do, and you can start to do more of what you like to do. It just makes sense. So it makes sense for me. That's the biggest shift, and it's understanding. So developing profiling reports was about saying, okay, even in a conversation, if I want a general answer, I can ask a chunked up question and get a general response, or I can ask what specifically do you mean by that, to get into what's the truth. Let's get some facts on the table. Not this statement, it's a bit wishy-washy. Let's understand more. So it's getting, when I look at a group of people, there's all these blurred, they're just blurred blobs of people, until I actually zoom right in and go, what's actually going on? How are you? And then you've got a chance to actually drill down a little bit.
I like that metaphor. What do you think's been the biggest lesson you've learned so far since you've set up on your own?
Biggest lesson. I think the biggest lesson is that it's. I don't know if there's one, to be honest, but it's a good question. If what you're doing is meaningful, but so if it's so I believe what I'm doing is purposeful. It's about stronger people, helping people to help people. So if I help managers help other people improve performance, then I'm not just helping one person, I'm helping through people to help other people. So my learning out of that is that I've got a methodology that does that. So I'm proving that works. I'm very content that that's a meaningful way for me to live my life. And since I've been in that mindset, I find that I'm attracting people in my direction who like that tone of voice. They want to experience more of who I am and what that methodology looks like. And it's, the part of it, people want to know the football stories, and there's loads of, I've done a couple of speaking gigs and a little bit of virtual presentations so far, and I'm interested in how those stories have shaped me that can become lessons for other people. And that's, there's lots around that. So my own identity is very clear now. I've been able to bank all that experience and turn it into something that helps people in the places where I want to help people.
What would you, if you could go back to 21-year-old, 22-year-old Tony jumping on the plane to go to Australia, looking back with all of the experiences you've had since then, what would you tell that version of you?
I'd definitely do it. I'd say go for it. I mean, the life lesson, that's it's a 30-year. There's 30 years of experience that I could, if I could say to him, use these tools that I've developed, and you'll get where you want to go much faster. That I definitely have offered that person.
Would you have been the type of with 21 or 22-year-old Tony been the kind of person to listen, or would you?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. I think I was so open to learning that probably would have been if they'd been able to say, look at what you're doing now. Just do this and see how it changes. If it was quick, because I get bored easily. If it was quick and I could see the impact, I'd probably have bought it. And it is quick, and it does have a quick impact. So I'd have given it a chance. It's funny. I mean, I flew out of Manchester and landed in Tasmania, not having had a playing career or anything like that. I was greeted at the airport by TV cameras and media,
Really?
without any idea that was going to happen. When I reflect back on that and I smile about it, and I was doing punditry on TV, sort of within 2 years. I was doing some like sports on Sunday as a 22-year-old, like, suited up on the telly. Thought it was really cool, and it is a really cool thing to have done in hindsight.
Great experiences, yeah.
Yeah, and it, I'm comfortable in that. Making a fool of myself I was not fearful of putting myself out there, which has been a blessing, and some great learnings that not everybody's wired that way. And when you try and drag people in a direction, in the past it would have just maybe worked or not worked, or worked to a lesser degree. Now I've got the insight and the knowledge and the psychology behind how to approach that in a different way. That comes with experience, and being able to share those experiences with other senior people that have perhaps been doing things a certain way for a certain period of time that just don't seem to work anymore. And people use generation gap as a reason why. And yes, lots of people are on social media, and there's much less human connection than there was before. People grow up with different technologies, but that's a cop-out for me. Yeah, because I'm the one that needs to move. If I'm the senior manager working with a younger generation coming through, it's with me to understand and make those adjustments. So I don't buy it.
You can't. Otherwise, you just sat there saying, "Well, it's their responsibility to go back in time, go back into my dinosaur
just don't do
way.
Things the way we used to do it.
Exactly.
They're just not the same. They don't work as hard. all these big low resolution ideas that were formed ages ago.
And we all have distorted memories of what life used to actually be like. It's not even the truth. Do you have a kind of a way of starting the day and ending the day? And if so, have you always had that, or have you changed or adopted something different?
I haven't always. I used to be a runner. I used to love running, and my intention during lockdowns and stuff was to get back into it, because I really do my best thinking when I'm running. But I think there's some pain avoidance has kicked in, and it's always a good idea, and I'm just not doing it.
The problem is with things like running, if you haven't done it for a while and it hurts like hell, the the incentive to go and do it is much lower. Once you go through that pain barrier after a couple of weeks and you get back into the cycle of running, and it doesn't hurt so much anymore, and your legs will still work, you can start to enjoy it again. But I'm like you, I haven't run for so long that every time I do try and run, I can't walk for a week.
It's
a cycle now instead.
So I have to discount that. So what I do now, and I don't know why my sleeping pattern, I'm not stressed, but I wake up early, like really much earlier than I don't want to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But I'm using that time for study, and I'm not studying in a formal way, just expanding my experience, you know, watching different people or reading. I have 2 black coffees. That's all. That's the only coffee I have in the morning. It's not for the kicker, or I don't. It probably is a little bit, but I don't get a buzz out of drinking coffee. But it's the smell. It's just like the routine of making a nice. It's a sensory. You know, I'm a sensory person, and I check the calendar because I live in the future. Sticking to tasks is an absolute nightmare. So having a look at, you know, tools that keep me grounded and organized are really, really important.
And what about the end of the day? Because I think I've started to ask this because it's easy to think about the beginning, and I think the start of the day, I think morning routines kind of get a lot of press and a lot of publicity, but the end of the day is something I've started to try and focus a bit more on. How do I wind down? Am I conscious at the end of the day? Do you do anything towards the end of the day to kind of like, you know, unwire, I guess, from the day you just had?
It's strange, isn't it? And I know all these things are great, and I've got my wife into meditation. She's working with the guy James Granstrom. He's brilliant, and it's like five or 10 minutes a day max that you need to do. And that's hard for me to get into that that routine. It's not like I can't sit still. I actually can. I love doing yoga, and they're all should do's. Everything from the physical activity to the yoga to the meditation. I could in half an hour a day, split between morning and evening, is a routine I am planning to get into.
You got to turn the should into a must, haven't you?
I think that'll be good for me.
I love it. A couple of more questions before we sign off for the conversation. But if you could gift the people listening now one book, what would that be?
I had a couple that I was thinking of. What Benjamin Zander, the art of possibility. So his quote that I love is, if your eyes are not shining, who am I being? He's a conductor. So if your eyes are not shining, who am I being? So, you know, he famously gave his students an A before term had even started, and then he got them to write him an essay about what they would have done in the year ahead to get to that pass mark. So he changes the way that they think. He's a genius. He's brilliant. So brilliant book, and you can see him on YouTube as well doing some of his. He gets a whole audience to love classical music in 20 minutes on a TED talk. It's amazing. And the other one, from a more of a business perspective, and there's loads, but there's a really short read called "Damn Good Advice" for people with talent, and it's by a marketer called George Lois. And it's sort of great look into branding and disruption and messaging. It's some really cool stuff in there about just, you know, putting a line in the sand and just making a statement in the right way can be life changing.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to check that one out. And last question I'll go for you is, who do you think's been the biggest inspiration to you in your career? Or life, I guess you can call it the broader sense.
It's funny. I think back to school, and I don't have memorable experiences from school. Didn't like school. Wasn't academic.
No, I was the same. I got memorable experiences, but they're not positive.
Yeah. You know, there are people through my football career who turned the lights on. In the way that they could change people's behaviour, but I honestly can't land on one.
I thought you were going to say Sir Alex being a United fan. You know.
No, I mean, because, you know, right now, Klopp, for example, I think he's a fascinating character. I think he's a great leader who would be in the top 1% of CEOs in any industry that he was in, because of his, you know, his clarity of his vision, his ability to tap into all the individuals in his team. So he does inspire me right now.
And to be a human, that's I think the important thing with people like Klopp is they don't lose their sense of humour, but they've got that magic art of being able to be very direct with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
I've worked with a few people like that have a very specific skill in. Everyone knows then they're serious, but they don't have to. They don't have to be an arsehole about it to get their point across. He's
a realist as well, isn't he? He's managing a football team, gets paid crazy amount of money to do it. So he's in the job of he's in a world of joyousness, and you can see that he gets that, and he takes that responsibility seriously. He probably knows it's crazy and accepts it for what it is, and he as an output of that, he's able to stay grounded and he connects. It's his ability to connect, I think, is, and everybody would like to be better at connecting.
Yeah. I think that's the important part. It is an ability to connect, and I think it links back to a lot of the things that we've spoken about today. Where can people track you down if they want to learn more about what you're doing now?
The www.theleadersadvisory.com is my website. Tony Walmsley on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat. I'm interested in talking to other coaches, consultants, and anybody that just wants to have a chat about performance and team development. I just love conversations and seeing where they can go. I'm all about collaboration and partnerships. So,
it's been great talking. And to be honest, we definitely could have spoken for the entire afternoon, because there's so many more questions I've got to ask. So you have to come back at some point.
I'd love to.
For now, thank you very much for giving up your time and sharing your journey, but also your perspective and the insight and on team performance. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of that.
David, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more similar episodes, head over to pocketmastermind.com, where you'll also find the links mentioned in this conversation. And if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review. It will really help us to get our message out and let more people know about these episodes. So leave us a review, leave us a rating, hit the subscribe button, and please share with your friends. Until next time, thank you again for listening.